Hi everyone, this is Kai with SeriousWatches, joined by Connor behind the camera, and today we want to be talking about a subject we get asked questions about quite frequently that usually boil down to where was this watch made? And that's a very valid question. I felt like it was a good idea to address it in a video, so I can tell you a little bit about where watches are made and how it works. Now what I won't do is turn this into a complete statistical rundown that get very boring, so I'm going to keep it relatively simple so you get the picture of what actually goes on in the factories. Obviously, Swiss made is the most common, the most prestigious thing you can find on a watch dial. Switzerland has been associated with watches for many years, and basically if you ask anyone in the streets where are the best watches made, they'll say Switzerland. And that's with good reason, because they have a very rich history with watches and the production of it. So it makes a lot of sense that Swiss made still holds a lot of prestige. And it also means that certain countries are associated with inferior quality. So I think it's good to look at what Swiss made actually means. Swiss made means that the watch is manufactured in Switzerland, obviously, otherwise I wouldn't say something else. But when you look at what are the requirements to actually be Swiss made, it basically boils down to that 60% of the value of a watch needs to be produced made in Switzerland. So 60% of the value. So that doesn't mean 60% of the watch needs to be made there. Say, if you were to use a very expensive part from Switzerland, that means you can lose a larger percentage of parts from anywhere else, whether it's made in Germany, whether it's made in Belgium, or wherever you want, it can be produced outside of Switzerland. Now, in reality, that means a lot of these parts are made in China. Is that a bad thing? Well, I'll get to that a little bit later. So 60% of the value needs to be Swiss. That means that 40% of the value of your watch is not Swiss made. That doesn't really sound like fully Swiss made, but they had to create some sort of guidelines within which to operate. So that means that certain brands will be trying to achieve the highest level of Swiss made as possible, so they'll go way beyond the 60%. Rolex, for example, have their own foundry where they make their own gold and that sort of thing. They take it very seriously, and some other brands will just try to get that Swiss made on the dial for the smallest possible amount, and they'll outsource as much as possible. Other countries, for example Germany, I'm wearing a very cool Sin watch right now, actually say made in Germany on the dial. But when you open up this watch, you'll find a Swiss made movement. So that's a made in Germany product, but it has a Swiss movement. The requirements for differ per country. And this watch always reminds me of my first car, which was a Porsche, but it was a Porsche 924. So it was like the entry level, cheapest possible Porsche you could buy. That was like my first car, and I was absolutely in love with that thing. But all my friends, especially the ones that know cars, tend to remind me quite vividly that it actually had a Volkswagen engine. So I would always get a reminder that it was not a proper Porsche because it had a Volkswagen engine, and again, Volkswagen is a German company, but it still was not the proper engine. Later on I ended up with a Mercedes. I think it had a French engine in there, so I've got made fun of quite a bit actually. But it's the same with Germany has very different legislation when it comes to whether or not you can say a product is made in Germany. Junghans, for example, we're an authorized Junghans dealer. We love the brand, but they put Swiss movements in made in Germany watches. So that also shows that while you may adore those words on the dial, they may not mean what you expect them to mean. And Japan has different legislation, and actually the US had a company, I think they're called Shinola, and what they did is they made watches in Hong Kong, put in a Japanese movement, and assembled them in the US and put handmade in the USA or something along those lines. I don't want to get sued, so they said something along the lines that they were actually made in the USA before they sue me, and they got in a lot of trouble for that, because obviously made in the USA has specific requirements and they didn't meet them, and they had to remove that from the dial, and it was pretty messy. But Google it, it's quite interesting to read actually. So that also means that different countries have different legislations, and it may not always mean what you expect it to mean. to come to the most one where we get the most questions about is whether or not a watch is made in China. And especially that implicitly it's like products made in China are bad or worse quality. Now let me say that all of your iPhones and all your Apple products are made in China. So that does mean that I use it as an example to show that Apple products are generally considered to be very good, but they're made in China. If the manufacturers, the factories, the machines that they use are good, if the quality control is good, they can produce wonderful products. And actually, if you go to a watch factory in China, you'll see a lot of very expensive machines that they also use in Germany, that they use in Switzerland. They have the same machines. However, they have a lot of them because they produce a lot of products. They produce a lot of watches. And you have to know that wage costs in China are actually not that low. It's not that cheap to produce in China anymore. Many companies are even going outside of China because it's become too expensive. They have the machines, the wages have risen a lot, quality's gone up as well, considering they have the same machines. But why would someone produce in China? It's because they actually have the production facilities. They have the machines, they have the people to produce the products. So that's a big benefit there. If you want to produce watches and you need them quickly and in a large quantity, you go to China because they have the facilities to do so. So it's not necessarily a cost-saving exercise anymore. You could go to a lower wage country and produce them even more cheaply. But it's mostly that they have the factories, they have the scale. So that's why their quality can still be good and their prices can be good because they have the advantage of being able to produce in larger quantities. So it's not necessarily a situation anymore where a watch produced in China is done so solely out of economic reasons, but it's also out of practical reasons. They have the experience, and these days the quality there is not bad. Sure, there are still bad watches, cheap watches being made in China. You can find it for like $2 on Amazon or something. I'm not saying those are high quality products, but I am saying that good quality these days comes out of China. And you have to realize that a lot of Swiss watches use the same factories, just ship it to Switzerland, have it assembled there, and get the Swiss made stamp on there because they use some Swiss parts. And you're seeing so much more quality coming from there. And there's, again, the reason not to go for China are more subjective rather than objective. So you probably expect me to say, buy Chinese. Well, that's not my point entirely, because buying a watch is not a rational decision. You buy a watch because it makes you feel good, not because you need a watch. We all know what time it is, and it's not really necessary anymore. You buy a watch because it makes you feel good, because it's your hobby, because it's your passion, because you like the mechanics of it, you like what it stands for. But it's not a rational decision. But what I am saying is that when you look at a watch and you love it, you think it looks great, but it doesn't say Swiss made on the dial, don't not buy it because you think the quality is less. Buy because you like it and don't really care what it says on the dial. Don't judge a book by its cover, as some would say. That's my conclusion. Like, the quality in China is not necessarily worse. And whenever a customer says, "Oh, that's too expensive for a made in China watch," it's hard for me to align with that statement, because a made in China watch can be just as good as a Swiss watch. So there's no real reason to say that watch is worth less because of the country of manufacture, especially if you look at it from a distance and see that a lot of Chinese products are already in Swiss made watches. Don't hate on China because they make great watches still, but buy the watch that you love. So do you disagree with me? Do you agree with me? Please leave a comment below, because I'd love to hear what you think, how you feel about the subject, because you can have a lot of different viewpoints and we can disagree, agree. Let me know what you think. Subscribe to our channel as well, because we'll be doing more of these videos. We still do our product videos as well. So if you like hearing from us, please subscribe, and thank you.